guys and gals, Insomnia from UnrealTek.net, a division of BlenderTek.com again. Today on video number 4 in Unreal Networking through Replication, we're going to start looking at variable replication at its most basic levels. Variable replication is very important in multiplayer games because, as I'm sure you know, most gameplay is driven by variables. So with that said, grab some popcorn if you're just watching. Remember our motto, create your way, and let's get started. Let's start out with some review. Review in networking or with networking is very important because it's so easy to mix things up and to forget what, when, and where things should be done based on the client-server model. Last time we created an actor that's just spun called BP Spinner. I've placed two of them here, one that replicates and one that does not replicate. You'll remember if we go into the blueprint, you can change that by going to class defaults and checking or unchecking the replicates and replicate movement checkboxes. So the BP Spinner has that checked and the BP Spinner no rep has them unchecked. So let's play it with two players. On the client, if we look over there, they are both spinning even though one is not replicated. Why is that? Remember, that's because these spinners are both local. So they're local to both the server and the client. So it doesn't matter if they replicate or not. They're both gonna be able to do this functionality, at least this cosmetic functionality. However, what I've done is over here I have spawned the exact same spinners. The actor replicates and the one that doesn't replicate, actor does not replicate. I've spawned them one beside each other. One should be there, as we see. The one that replicates is sitting there spinning, but there should be one over here that should be spinning, but we don't see it at all. Why is that? That's because it doesn't replicate. If we quickly move over to our networking game here and to the servers, so we're the server, we have authority. The one that replicates we see, and the one that does not replicate we see moving and spinning, and we see it because we are spawning them based on the server's authority. All that is on event begin play. Remember, the switch has authority node I told you will become very important. I'm saying if we're the server, spawn in a BP spinner and a BP spinner no replication. And so what's happening here is we're spawning these in and they're local to the server. So the server sees them no problem, but only the one that replicates is going to work on the client. Now, if we set both of these to be the replicated one, obviously we would see both. Or if we were to set it to remote, watch what happens. Then you'll notice that we see both because now it's local. We are the remote, we're the client, and thus we see both. If we go to the server, that's the client, that's the server. You'll notice now, because we're the server and we have authority, but since we're not remote, we don't see his spinners. So that's how that's a very simple way to show that. Basically, you could say even have the remote spin one at the target position 1 and have authority, so the server spawn one at target point 2. So they'll both have one that they can see. And so we'll just set this to spinner. So you'll see now that the client can see both of them because he sees the servers that replicates, but he also sees his local one. And then if we go to the server, we see that we only see the one that the client has spawned in that replicates. This is where that switch has authority comes into effect. So the server that has authority spawns in the one spinner, and the client's able to see it because it replicates, so he can see both, but the server can only see his because the client is only spawning the one in. However, if we were to go ahead and paste this over here, if we were to spawn not only the client's one, but the server's one on the remote switch or as the client, and allow the server to spawn in one of his own, then you'll see that that gets changed. You will notice that the client has both as usual, and there's actually one overlapping because we're seeing the replicated one from the server, the one that's spawned on authority, and the server, he only sees his again. As you can see, depending on how you set it up, depends on who gets to see what, because these are all replicated. If I was to spawn them both on authority and none on remote, because they replicate, we see them both. The server is replicating those actors back to the client, and the server sees both of them because he has the authority. He owns them, essentially. He does own them. He spawned them in, essentially, because he's the server and he has authority. However, again, if we switch that so that we go just remote and not authority, so it switches through here, it says, are you the server or are you the client? We're the client and we're going to spawn these in. Well, in that case, then our client sees both of them because he owns them and he spawned them and they replicate. And the server sees nothing because although they replicate, the client owns them, and the client's not telling the server to see them at all, to have them show up. So that's starting to get a little bit more advanced, but just a little bit of review of how sometimes things will show up and won't show up based on how you set it up. So let's backtrack a little bit. We're starting to get into stuff that may seem very confusing and makes no sense. So let's backtrack all the way to the beginning. We know the very basics of checking off the replicates and replicates movement check mark when we want to create a prop that replicates so that everybody sees it. And in the last video we saw how if we tried to get a variable from somewhere else that was not replicated, we would get errors. We saw that with print strings. And we've seen now how based on the switch has authority switch node, depending who spawns what will decide who sees what. But let's backtrack basically to the basics. We've got a general idea of basic actor replication. If we have a box that we want to spin and we want to make sure that everybody sees it, all we got to do is go in there and check off replicates and replicate movement. Simple as that. So that's basically all we need to know at this point, as well as the fact that the switch has authority node. All it does is it asks, are we the server or are we a client? So knowing that, let's go back to variable replication. So before we begin replicating variables, let's start with local variables. So that is variables that are local both to the server and the client, so that we don't have to worry about variable replication per se. So what we have here is the spinner cube, but I've just turned off the spinning. And so we are showing off the switch has authority statement here. So what's going to happen is it's going to come into here and it's going to ask, okay, do we have authority or are we the remote? Basically, are we the server or are we the host? And based on that response, it'll either say auth authority or auth authority remote. So let's see what happens. So when we hit play, the client, when he looks at it, he says, or he sees auth authority remote. So it's going through the switch statement. It's saying, you're not the server, so we're going to display auth authority remote. And then if we go to the server, you'll see that it goes through and it says, oh, hey, you're the server. So we're going to instead show auth authority. So that is a much simpler and easier to understand way to show how the switch has authority statement works. And we're working with just local variables here. Our literal text and our text render, for that matter, aren't being replicated from some other class. However, in our class defaults, we are set to replicate. However, if we turn it off, you will notice that it still works because, as I said before, it's still local. So, moving on. Next, we'll look at basic variable replication. So we have our little friend here again, our spinner cube, and he has the text HP for health points. So if we go into his blueprint, we will see what happens is on event begin play, we check to see if we have authority, and if we do, if we're the server, then we set the health to 10, and then we set a timer by event, so just a custom event, that removes one health point every 3 seconds over and over. After that, on event tick, so every single frame, both the server and the remote or client will see health updates. So our health variable, as you can see, if I have it selected, has the little eyeballs, which means it's replicated. I've set it from none to replicated. And I'm going to change its default value from 10 to 0 because we are setting it to 10 by the server. The server should be handling stuff like that, setting health and removing health, because we don't want to let players remove or set their own health for obvious reasons and just for networking reasons. However, both the server and the client are able to see the health. That's completely safe and fine. So let's see what this looks like. So on our client, we see 0. And after 3 seconds, you would expect something to change, but it does not. However, if we move to our server, as you can see, the health is going down. It obviously started at 10. So 4, 3, etc., etc. So that's working on the server, but not the client. So that shows that even though this variable is replicated, and even though we're able to see the text and try to get that value as a client, because we are setting and removing it only on the server, then only the server is going to see those changes. And inversely, you'll see if we set it to happen only on the client to initialize and start removing health points, you'll see that now the client can see those changes, the server does not. It works the same way, but this time we're working with a replicated variable. So now would be a good time to go with a little aside and say, okay, well, what would be the right way to set this up? Technically, health should be a rep notify and not replicated, but replicated will work just fine for our learning. So we're going to have the server set the health and start removing the health. But what we're going to have happen over here is we are going to take the remote switch, so the remote client, and we're going to set timer by event, and we're going to do it every 3 seconds in looping, and then we're going to go to a custom event, and we're going to call this client remove health. And so this is still local. We're nowhere near getting into like replicated events and such, but we're going to allow the client to remove health. We're not going to let them set health, but we're going to let them remove health every 3 seconds. Now, this isn't the proper way to do it technically, but it will show how the server can set it and then the client can remove it as well as the server. So the server and client will be able to make those visual changes, but only the server will be able to set the health. And we see an issue. It starts at 0 and it goes down because we're not setting it to -10. However, on the server, it's working just fine. It's going down from 10. So as you can see, because we only set the health to 10 on authority on the server, and the remote is removing health, even though it's replicated, it's getting the default value of 0 because it's not getting this set health to 10 event from or statement from the server. So that's why it starts counting down from 0 into the negative number. So that's why health, you would go to rep notify, which I'm not going to get into it right now, but it makes sense. You notify that health has changed and we do something about it. But I'm going to leave this here and continue on. But that shows you again how the switch statement works, how gameplay stuff should be handled only on the server. This technically shouldn't even be happening at all, and how just setting a variable to replicate does not necessarily mean it's going to work on all of the clients. And I should add that we don't even need the switch has authority statement here on the event tick. We can just go straight to set text and it would work the exact same way. The client would see 0 and the server would see 10, 9, 8, 7, etc. So you can look at it this way, that the server is doing this because it has authority, and the server and the client are doing the event tick stuff here. So the only thing that the clients are doing is this right here. And since they have no way of knowing that the health was set in any way or getting removed in any way, because they weren't notified and they didn't have authority to do all this, they're just seeing 0 constantly, the default value. So that shows off the client or the server client model again. Since I brought it up, and since health really has to do with it, I should bring up a repnotify and how it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the health variable and I'm going to change it to repnotify. Now notice it says set with notify where we're setting it. So take note of that, and also notice it created a function for us over here called onRepHealth. And if you open this function, it has no details. It's an automatic generated function for any variables that are set to repnotify. So basically what's happening, anytime we set the variable, so let's say we're doing the same thing on the server, we're going to set the health to 10. So I'm going to drag it in here as a setter. So it says set with notify. Basically what it's saying is, okay, we're going to set this variable, but at the same time, we're also going to call this onRepHealth function. So it's not only going to set the health to 10, it's also going to call onRepHealth. To show this very quickly, we can just go print string health was set to 10 HP. And we can make that stay up there for, say, 5 seconds. So let's see what that simple change does. And now when we hit play on the client, we see health was set to 10 HP, even though we can't see it, and nothing else happens. And on the server, you see, yeah, you can see in the background, server health was set to 10 HP. And of course, as usual, the server can see the health going down. So why use repnotify? Well, because now we can say, okay, on repHealth, we're not the server, so we're not able to modify the health, but now we can do something when that health changes. So when the health gets set, then what we want to do is we want to take this down here. We want to call all this. So we're going to call that function. So when the health gets changed, it's going to call this function. It's going to set the text to the health. So if we go back here, so it will work the first time now if we play it. Okay, so he's just seeing stock nothing. He's not even getting anything, but the server will be seeing 10. That is because we're going off this old replication logic. So it's simply just pulling. We're setting it, and then we're going to set this timer by event. But what we're doing is we're setting the text only that one time. So what we need to do is basically we need, so we're going to set with notify to 10 to call this event. Then we're going to set the timer by event to remove health. So what we need to do with that is we need to get health and then set with notify health to health. So then we're going to call that function again and it'll set the health. Now when we play it, the client, as you can see, will not see anything, and the server is just going to see 10 again, which is what we set it to. The reason for that is a simple mistake. I just made it set itself back to itself. We need to remove, so health minus decrement, no, can't decrement, so we'll just minus, so just -1, and then set with notify, which will then call this function again. So save, play. So now the client, he sees just HP, but the server is seeing 7, 8, whatever, so on and so forth. So that's great. Now the server sees it and we have the repnotify working. But how do we make it so that the client can see it as well? Well, what we need to realize is that onRepHealth is only getting called on the server. So you would assume, let's just add a switch authority and have it execute that on both the authority and the remote, so the server and the client. So every single time we remove health, then we change the text, and you would assume that to work, but it does not. It just sticks the same, because if I can get this showing, you will see that it's only executing through the authority string. If the remote does not get executed on the onRep health function. So if we remove that, because obviously that's only going to happen on the server, we need some way to get the client to show it. So the simple fix is to put our logic back into the event tick, but create a new non-replicated variable called local health. And then we'll add in a switch has authority statement, and we'll say if we're the server, we get the replicated value and we replicate the health value out. And when we do that, we want to set the text for the server, but we want to set local health for the clients to whatever value health is at, the replicated variable. Now this is a very hackish way to do it, and it's still not the totally correct way, but it kind of gets the point across. So on authority on tick, we're going to set it to the replicated value, which is itself getting basically duplicate over local health. And so if we're the client remote, we're just going to do the same thing. And this will make more sense once we start getting into custom events. We're going to set it to local health. So it's not replicated, it doesn't use up any network traffic. Now when we play, we can see that it does not go down on the client. We do not have authority. As you can see, it's not executing remote again. And that is because I made a very dumb mistake. I forgot to set this this BP spinner to replicate. So once I do that, then it's firing off on remote, and as you can see, we are seeing it happen on the client as well as the server, and they're seeing the same values. And so now that this replicates, what we can do is we can set this, actually, since on set with notify, we're setting the health and then we're calling this function. We don't need to set the local health. We don't need local health. We're getting the replicated variable. This actor now replicates and it has the replicated variable. So now the client sees the health go down. By making sure that your class replicates, and in this instance using a repnotify replicated variable set to repnotify, so that on the server we set the health to 10, then on the server only we remove 1 from the replicated health variable, and then we set that variable with a notification to call the onRep health function it generated, which sets the text, which is all local, to the replicated value, and thus it works on both client and server now. So that is how you would properly set up health usually. Use a repnotify. You say, okay, this actor replicates its health out to everybody. We have a replicated health variable, but only the server is setting the health and removing the health. So in a later video, we will add that to our character and we'll start setting up a multiplayer game. If you guys have any ideas for what you want to see in a multiplayer game, let me know and we will do it through tutorials while teaching network replication. So basically though, with the repnotify replication variable or variable replication, you have to think of it as the server is setting it, setting the variable replicated, and also notifying the client. And so the server is setting it, and then it's running the onRep health command, but it's also saying to all the clients, hey clients, I set the health, so you need to run this event too. So the clients and the servers are both basically running that. Well, they are both running that. Just the server's running it first, then notifying the clients, hey guys, you need to run this. So going back to the server client model. And I'll make in a little addition. This is when relevancy and reliability come into effect here. If I was to make a custom event really quickly, you can see that we have this reliable check mark that we talked about before, and so a replicated variable is always going to come through. However, you got to remember that there is network latency. So you have to think that on clients it might be a little bit slower. So you have to take latency or lag into effect sometimes. Once we get into function replication, you'll see the reliable flag parameter, whatever, and we'll go into what that means exactly. So in the next video, I am going to get into the next portion of networking, which is function replication. We have the not, multicast, run on server, run on own client, and with the reliable flag mixed in with a switch auth, a switch has authority node mixed in with replicated variables. So we'll talk about replicated functions in the next video. So thanks for watching from the team here at UnrealTek, a division of BlenderTek.com. We are now taking donations if you look in the description. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. We're on social media as well on the links on your screen. If you dislike this video for some reason, please tell us why so we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests, so we'll see you next time. Remember, create your way.